Starting off at number 10, we have Forget-Me-Not. I wanted to start this list off really small, with a character y'all may not know. Mainly because almost no one knows him because that's his power. Appearing in 2014, Forget-Me-Not had actually been a member of the X-Men for several years before this, but thanks to his abilities, no one can remember him. Forget-Me-Not's abilities make it so that he is imperceptible in all forms, basically. The power is so good that even Charles Xavier himself had to place a psychic reminder on himself so that he would remember Forget-Me-Not's existence. Clearly, that means some of the most powerful telepaths have difficulty discovering him, let alone remembering him. His power is to be forgotten, but the unique ways this power could be used, and the uniqueness of this power in general, will keep him in my mind. Number 9, we got I-Boy. Why is a guy named I-Boy on a list of strongest members of the X-Men? I see you, like many of the other mutants, are very judgmental. Trevor Hawkins' body is covered in eyes, 57 to be exact, which give him an array of powers that honestly, you kinda may expect. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all a part of his power list. But he can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can almost read other people's minds by reading their behaviors and body language. He is an incredible tracker. He can predict attacks and can read people's histories just by looking at them. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see electronic wavelengths and microwaves, is able to see past illusions and disguises as well as magic waves. He makes an amazing detective, in short. On top of all that, he can even pass what he sees onto others, but he has to be physically close enough for it to work. But to top it all off, the craziest and most unexpected power he possesses recently is solar blasts. We don't know how just yet, but Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focused beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. Coming in at number 8, it's Gwenpool. I think Gwenpool has one of the strangest powers. That would be the power of medium interaction, which is because she comes from a reality very much like ours, as in superheroes are fictional people in comic books. So, when Gwen was transported to a pocket universe that recreated her home reality, Gwen's perception of the fictional world allowed her to gain the ability to recognize and manipulate the artistic medium that she was now in. She can see and physically interact with lettering and caption boxes, and touch and even break through panel gutters, allowing her to transport objects short distances through space and time by moving them across panels, and she interacts with different instances of herself from multiple panels on the same page. Now, I don't know if you've realized this, but this kind of means Gwendolyn Poole can kind of warp reality in a way. She kind of becomes one of the most crazily powerful characters in comics, at least potentially. She first showed up in Howard the Duck Volume 6 number 1 in November of 2015, and she has actually teamed up with many different characters and teams, including being a member of the X-Men on and off again.
And it's 7 Strix. Silly rabbit, Strix are for kids. I'm not sorry about that one. The Court of Owls storyline that launched Batman into the New 52 is held in high esteem. And directly through these comics came Mary Turner, aka Strix, a former Talon/immortal assassin for the Court of Owls. And she's gone severely underrated. As a child, she was horribly disfigured by a bomb attached to a balloon. That's like if Pennywise was a criminal with no powers. Like, what the actual hell? During her time as an assassin, she faced Batgirl, ultimately letting her go even though she had won, because they both wore masks. She rarely appears outside of her creator's books, but every time she shows up, she's a delight to read. She reformed in an effort to atone for her past, and has been included in the Birds of Prey and Secret Six. While hardly anyone knows her, I know I didn't until I was researching this list, but she is still a wonderful character that deserves to be taken out of limbo and shown more in larger storylines.
Number 6! It's Synch. Everett Thomas isn't a new character by any means, being first introduced in 1994, but while he was a part of Generation X, he didn't officially land on the team until this newest iteration of X-Men. He was also one of the first mutants resurrected by the Five on Krakoa, due to the fact that his powers could enable him to act as a substitute for any of the Five who might need to tag out. With that said, what are his powers? Synch's powers are known as synchronistic power replication. Synch basically produces this really cool funkadelic looking aura that allows him to synchronize with other supers in his vicinity, letting him use their powers unless they leave the vicinity. But what's really interesting is that he doesn't need that person to be completely there. So if you had like a tissue sample from a superpowered person, he could sync with that and it would be enough. Since his resurrection, his powers have been amped up, giving him a limited memory bank of powers he's synced with. He became an official base member of the new X-Men team announced at the Hellfire Gala alongside Laura Kinney in X-Men Volume 5 number 21 in 2022.
Number 5. Apolitical Politics. Art Spiegelman is known as one of the most acclaimed comic writers. He even won a Pulitzer Prize for his graphic novel Mouse. When asked to write an introductory essay for a collection of Marvel works, a phrase referring to Donald Trump as an orange skull was highlighted by the editing team, who said that due to Marvel's editorial policy, it would have to be omitted in order for the introductory essay to make it to print in regards to the collection. Spiegelman was slightly surprised and ended up rescinding his essay as a result. This news led to much backlash from both the Marvel and general comic book fan community alike, who criticized Marvel for making political statements only when it was safe or could be used to make them more money, and hiding behind an apolitical policy when they were too afraid to make statements. Let's not forget that Marvel themselves created a villainous version of Trump in 2016's Spider-Gwen annual, known as MODAK, and yet they can't have that phrase in an essay. I mean, what are you doing, Marvel? Which one are we doing here?
Number 4, it's Dupe. First appearing in X-Force number 116 in 2001, Dupe's origin story is kind of hard to explain, because we don't know for a fact what it is. Captain America tells us he was a US Cold War weapons project, and he apparently had some kind of role in the fall of communism. He was originally a member of X-Force until eventually becoming a member of X-Static. For such an unthreatening character, Dupe is surprisingly strong. He has been described as being an extra-dimensional being with a genius-level intellect, bordering on possible omniscience. And he has a large array of psionic powers, one of which includes controlling Russians. He can change his size and shape at will, allowing him to heal wounds and reassemble parts of his body if they have been removed or cut off. He has an incredible level of super strength and durability as well, with an unknown limit, being able to match and overcome Thor in a fight when he was in a weakened state, taking hits from Mjolnir while he did so. He seems to be able to come back from the afterlife, and he also has a pocket dimension inside himself that he can store things in and summon creatures from. He can also completely break the fourth wall and go across the comic panels. Dupe has defeated the devil all by himself. He is overpowered, and I don't know how anyone loses with him on their team.
Getting close to the end at number 3, Bluebird. Originally, it seemed like Bluebird was just going to be a female Nightwing, but she has grown to be much more than a superhero substitute. She is a mix of plenty of members of the Bat family, and makes a pretty big splash when she's thrown into a situation. Harper Row is a young girl living in Gotham's Narrows with her brother Cullen. Seems like a bit of a vampire. They fled from their abusive father and got emancipated, but after randomly meeting Batman, she was determined on joining his team to help him. Her relationship with the Bat is slightly antagonistic but still respectful, which is something else in the DC universe. Batman has mentored many children over the years, and somehow they keep joining even though they'll probably die. But none of the hero's other compatriots have really had this kind of relationship, so she fills a role that nobody else has really been able to. It's nice, fresh, and she has a dope costume. It's very similar to that of Nightwing combined with Red Hood. It's honestly dope, realistic to our world rather than the DC universe. But I just don't know how she turns her neck.
Number 2, Elixir. Joshua Foley, otherwise known as Elixir, is a mutant with Omega-level healing abilities. He's incredibly powerful, and while originally was just considered a general threat, he can actually use his powers offensively as well, completely ending lives if he wants to. Using his mutant ability of biokinesis, Elixir is capable of controlling the biological structure of his own and other people's bodies down to the genetic level. Now this started off small, but has grown to allow him to simultaneously heal dozens of people, resurrect himself and others, and even the ability to control, manipulate, and absorb the life forces of other living creatures. Offensively, he can use his death touch to harm others, to cause different types of illness, massive swellings, and organ failure. He's even completely destroyed the body of enemies before. He is one of the core members of the Five, as I'm sure no one is surprised about, and he has been a member of the X-Men ever since he was one of the only surviving mutants who retained his powers at the Xavier Institute after M-Day, and he was trained to become one in 2006's New Mutants. Number 1. Hope Summers. Hope Summers was the first mutant born after the events of M-Day, the mutant decimation, or the day that Scarlet Witch cast No More Mutants. She was then taken into the far future and raised by Cable, being carried around in the coolest baby Bjorn you'll ever see. Not too long after, she returned to the present and her mutant powers finally activated. Her power is basically that of Omega level power manipulation. She can manipulate the powers of other mutants nearby to her, even mimicking their powers, but at full capacity and with complete control over those powers. And she can even take on multiple powers at once, but it is pretty tiring for her to do that. A large part of her role in the Krakoan society is as the leader of the Five, who use their abilities to resurrect the mutants of Krakoa. Her role on the Five specifically is both to boost their powers to their full potential and help them work in synergy with each other perfectly. She also helped terraform Mars alongside Vulcan and Proteus, giving them enough power to actually do it. She is such a cool character, and she first appeared back in X-Men Volume 2 number 205 in 2008, but was a child for much of that until she came of age and joined X-Force and the X-Men.
Number 10. Mar-Vell. When Captain Marvel came out, there was a lot of backlash surrounding the film for many reasons, but I'm not here to talk about the SJW stuff. I am here to talk about some changes made to one specific character, Mar-Vell. In the story, the character of Mar-Vell was gender swapped and played by Annette Bening, who I personally thought did a great job as the Kree scientist slash superhero. But why did we gender swap the role? I'm a big fan of gender swaps when they are done well and they mean something, but many people were left to ask why this has been swapped. It didn't seem to inform any relevant changes to the character. Was it because they simply preferred Bening for that role? Or was it to convey an air of mystery in regards to who Mar-Vell was in the story? And if it's the latter, making a great change to the character's alias should have also then happened. As much as I like the idea of the change being plot driven, they then made her alias Wendy Lawson, an obvious parallel for comic fans to the comic book Mar-Vell's Walter Lawson. So yeah, this gender swap didn't really feel relevant and as such left people asking unsatisfied, but why though? Number 9. Strange Academy. Strange Academy's first issue was just recently released early March 2020, but when the comic was first announced, it was met with lots of mixed feelings from Marvel fans, and fans of another popular franchise. See if you can guess which one. The idea around Strange Academy was to spin a yarn about a school of uniquely magically gifted youngsters who join an academy in New Orleans to hone their powers. Sounding familiar yet? Many took to Twitter to share their outrage for what was deemed a potential ripoff of many other magically based series and fandoms involving academies. Yep, one of them being, you guessed it, the magical world of Harry Potter. Of course, the first issue is out now, so this is one people can now read up on and decide for themselves if this backlash was warranted or not. Number 8. First openly gay character. In the MCU, that is. When it was rumored that the first openly gay character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe would finally appear after more than 20 films, people were of course excited and eager to find out who the character was and to learn more about them and their story. All the excitement unfortunately only led to disappointment and outrage from fans when we found out that the character, played by Joe Russo himself, was only in 10 seconds of the 3-hour film. 10 seconds, that's all we got. The character was simply an unnamed civilian who is part of a support group led by Steve Rogers himself, seeking to help those who lost loved ones during the snap. What do we discover about him? Well, we discovered that he simply lost his partner and is trying to get back into dating again. He had no importance in regards to the main narrative, and while the filmmakers had good intentions when it came to including an openly gay character, his lack of substance or importance made people feel like Marvel was merely pandering. People had been looking for more meaningful representation, though Kevin Feige and the Marvel and Disney team responded to the backlash, assuring fans that more genuine overall diversity in the world of supers could be expected in the next phase.
Number 7. Laura Kinney. I know, she isn't really new as a character, but Laura Kinney, or X-23, has become the all-new Wolverine, and that is relatively new. She officially joined the X-Men as this Wolverine at the Hellfire Gala in 2021. There are a few characters with powers similar to Wolverine, and there are even a few who are clones of Laura herself. But of all these characters, Laura is certainly the best and definitely the most fan-loved. Her powers are very similar to Logan's, with her primary mutant power being an accelerated healing factor. And obviously she also has retractable bone claws, only she has 2 in her forearms and 1 in her foot. Well, each foot. She was obviously a clone and grew up being made to be a weapon, so of course she has an extremely haunted past. But with Logan as a father figure in her life, she grew up under him, and she even did the same for Gabrielle Kinney, another clone who Laura considers to be her younger sister. She's already done so much, but I just kinda can't wait to see what else she does as Wolverine.
Number 6. Iceman comes out. Okay, so you know me, I'm all for having gay characters and supers in the Marvelverse. I'm even for retconning some characters' sexual orientations to provide a more diverse cast when it comes to some of our original super teams' makeup. Because, you know, they were all really straight at the beginning there, because it was the 50s and the 60s. But this retcon got a lot of backlash for a reason that I would say is pretty understandable. Not what was being done, but really more how it was done. A common complaint among Marvel fans when it comes to decisions and retcons that are made for our most beloved characters. The fact that a younger Bobby Drake and a younger Jean Grey from the past had to convince him of his sexuality was weird. Like, why did he have to realize that he'd been gay all along? Why couldn't this have just been a thing that he realized in the present by himself? It just felt very put upon as opposed to being natural and organic. Many people rediscover their sexual orientation and sexuality every day. It isn't like you have to always know from the beginning. It can be more fluid than that. And the way this was written in and then later kind of dropped again made the whole thing feel kind of, well, forced, and like they were using it. Like I said, I like that they made this choice, but like many, I wish that they'd executed the moment of revelation with a bit more grace, and not by saying that if you aren't in love with Jean Grey, you must be gay. Not everyone has to be in love with Jean Grey, guys, okay? Just because you're an X-Men, you don't have to be in love with Jean Grey. Stop it. It's weird.
Halfway through at number 5, Defacer. One of Nightwing's love interests is a reformed criminal. Defacer was once a sidekick to Pigeon, a small-time criminal who Batman and Robin caught and arrested along with Defacer. After she was caught, Shawn Sang was sent to restart her life. After being released, she relocated to Bloodhaven and joined the former villain support group known as the Runoffs. Probably set up by Batman in all honesty, just like the superhero support group. She lived happy in recovery even though she never trusted any superheroes. Then Nightwing showed up and Shawn got arrested on suspected murder. She asked Nightwing if he could help clear her name. After he did, they started dating for a time. She even suited up to help her boyfriend on the occasional criminal takedown. Unfortunately, they didn't last forever. She even got kidnapped by Deathwing. But she was still a cool character, and despite the odd name and backstory, was important to a character we all love. So she should be important to us too, right?
Number 4. Hail Hydra. As much as there was a lot to love about this event, there was also a lot that people were left hating. Captain America ended up being revealed as a longtime Hydra sleeper agent, which was amazing considering how many times he'd publicly fought against Nazis and Hydra only to be revealed as one of them. This is a big part of Cap's character. Of course, this mentality and plot wouldn't stay permanent. I mean, could you believe if it had? Nope, it was all a dream. Well, not quite a dream, but more an altered reality that happened as a result of some tampering with the Cosmic Cube. However, because it was so against Cap's character, this change created a lot of uproar in the comic community, with people either loving or hating this whole adventure regarding Cap and everyone else that was involved. I think the other thing a lot of people were upset about was the fact that this story felt like it was simply made for shock value. Made to shock people into buying comics, because how could Cap be a Hydra agent? What's going on? You just had to find out, which honestly made the whole controversy just a little bit worse. Shock value for comics, I get it, you gotta sell comics, but also, really? Like, that's very shocking for people that are huge fans of Captain America.
Coming in at number 3, it's Tempest. Eva Bell first was seen in all new X-Men #1 in 2012 when we also saw her mutant powers manifest. She was out with friends and a boy when her brother showed up and began to get into a fight with that boy. The stress and duress of the situation caused her powers to pop off, and she completely froze everyone within a city block of her in time for 20 hours until the X-Men showed up, helped her, and then took her in. She's been referred to as near Omega level with her ability of chronokinesis within a time bubble, meaning she can freeze and slow down time and is one of the best at it in the world. She can also speed up time in the bubble by decades if she chooses to, which is why she is a member of the Five to age up whoever is being resurrected. And she can even time travel. Although she has shown to lose control over this power from time to time, there is no doubt she is and can become more incredibly powerful.
Number 2. Avengers vs. Martin Scorsese. This backlash from Marvel fans was not directed at Marvel itself, but instead at Martin Scorsese, who remarked that MCU films were more about entertainment than the art of cinema. Fans not only revolted against the famed director, but also revolted against those who sided with him, which oddly enough included 2015's Fantastic Four film director and writer Josh Trank. Although he deleted the tweet after, he originally posted on Twitter his opinion of a genre of films that he actually was oddly enough a part of, despite the fact that FF was not really part of the MCU, saying, "Watching The Irishman, the first 5 minutes have more humanity and truth and cinematic intrigue than the running length of every single Marvel movie combined. Ah, sorry, facts. P.S. not sorry." Wow, hashtag troll life. Number 1, Snowflake and the New Warriors. I mean, you knew we were going to talk about this, right? The New Warriors was always meant to be a team about radicalizing the world of heroes. They were meant to be edgy and relatable to the youth of today. But this version of the New Warriors takes that commitment a little too far, and while trying to make themselves more relatable, only seems to end up inevitably distancing the very people they want to attract. The backlash surrounding the New Warriors is not about what they're trying to do, but like with most things, the lack of tact they seem to be able to exhibit while reinventing this squad of supers. It's almost like the squad was made without anyone actually reaching out and conversing with the groups that they're meant to represent. Oh, wait. The most problematic of the new heroes appears to be Snowflake and Safe Space. Snowflake is the first Marvel superhero to be explicitly labeled as non-binary. Cool, but why are we calling them Snowflake? Add in the fact that Safe Space, another term that is often made fun of online and often thrown around in a condescending way in regards to the LGBTQ community, is the name of Snowflake's twin, and that the two are described as a binary pair. And you already have more cringe to add to an already pretty cringy problem. Especially when you look at how the two are often drawn together, how they hold one another. Anyone else getting some Iggy Maximov twincest vibes here? No, just me? Ooh.
In a 10 Hazmat. One day while making out with her boyfriend, Jennifer Takata stops when he falls into a coma. It turns out powers she didn't know she had activated, releasing enough radiation to cause the coma. Unluckily for her, her powers activated during a time where Norman Osborn was the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. So they found her and took her in for rigorous testing against her will, in the efforts of making her stronger and to use her as a weapon. He locked her in a suit that caused her to constantly leak enough radiation that anyone who would come close to her would die. But after escaping and being brought into the Avengers Academy, she developed a friendship with Metal, which abruptly ended when he was murdered by Arcade. Recently, she's been able to get some degree of control over her abilities, which lets her work outside of the suit, but she's had a tough life as all superheroes have, and she currently works with Captain Marvel. In a 9 Fast Track. Mina Dejuan was a Star Labs employee until a Speed Force storm struck her, turning her into a superhero. She was able to pick up on her abilities quickly, and was able to keep up with Barry Allen physically and mentally. She was an excellent partner for the Flash, and even helped to mentor the new Kid Flash. But she was in a tricky situation. It appeared like she had been killed by Godspeed. She had returned as an agent of the Black Hole, a villainous organization that is currently being explored in the CW show, so we may see her pop up in later episodes. But that will take a different route since in the comics Mina and Barry dated, so they won't really be able to include that as a story element in the show. Do you watch the show? And do you think that Fast Track will make an appearance? They haven't had a nude speedster in a few seasons after all. Not including Earth 90 Barry, that was the original TV series. But with only half a season left, they'll have to fast track the story. I'm sorry. In an 8 Jane Foster. Jason Aaron's popular Thor run led to one of the biggest twists or shakeups or earthquakes, whatever you want to call it, in Thor history. Thor was briefly deemed unworthy of wielding Mjolnir, but in the wake of this moment, it fell to Jane Foster. She took on the mantle of Thor in stride as the 9 realms raged in war, but the reason that was given for her worthiness was something that would even make Odin himself cry. She was dying of cancer. Every time she transformed, it would reverse the effects of her chemotherapy. Being Thor was killing Jane, but that wouldn't stop her, hence why she was worthy. She understood that Earth needed protecting, and she asked Thor could do that. She was such a popular character, in fact, that they are adapting her role onto the screen, with Natalie Portman returning as Jane in Thor Love and Thunder, where she will reportedly use a restored Mjolnir, since the MCU one broke.
Number 7. Quicksilver dies. Quicksilver is known for being one of the fastest, if not the fastest person in the Marvel Universe. His need for speed has saved the Marvel Universe more than once, and he's a popular and well-known character and stable among the superhero community. And yet, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he was reduced to death by bullet. Yep. A guy who in the world of Fox Marvel X-Men can apparently move fast enough to save the entire occupants of the X-Mansion, fish included, from an explosion as it is in the midst of happening. Really? Really, Disney and Marvel? Really, you gonna do him like that?
Gabrielle Kinney is a young clone of X-23, which basically means she's a clone of a clone. There has got to be a term for that. There is actually the possibility of that now though. Typically when you create a clone in real life, they would have some form of abnormality. But scientists at the Riken Center for Developmental Biology in Japan managed to clone 24 generations of mice from a single one. They were even able to reproduce on their own. So there could be up to like 23 more clones of Wolverine. Oh god. There is a point to that however, because she is one of a group of 10 clones of X-23, Bellona, Zelda, X-23-3 Par being a few. She escaped Alchemax with these sisters and ended up getting adopted by X-23, who ended up becoming her mother figure. She possesses the typical Wolverine powers, but with bone claws rather than metal. She also has a pet Wolverine called Jonathan, which just makes her that much better and honestly the sweetest thing on this list. She was unfortunately missing in Jonathan Hickman's X-Men relaunch, and now she goes by Scout, but I think that Honey Badger is the cuter name, so I'm gonna keep calling her that for this list.
Number 5. Zorn. Question: what would you do if you and your twin brother developed the mutant ability of having your head become a star? Answer: I honestly don't know how you would still be alive to decide what to do in the first place. Shen Zorn and his twin brother Quan Yin Zorn both developed mutant powers that, in essence, were tiny stars that burned away and replaced their actual heads. They were both isolated, and they both wear super cool looking iron helmets with power dampeners to contain their power from doing too much damage. Shen is called Zorn with a Z, and his head is actually technically a black hole. And to keep things not confusing, Quan Yin is also named Zorn, but with an X. Okay, so what the heck can they do with their powers? Well, both of these characters can produce gravitational electromagnetism, which could actually allow them to heal others and use telepathy, and also, really weirdly, somehow allowed them to sense when people died and speak using shaking gravitational particles. Zorn, the one with a Z, could suck people into his black hole and even turn his black hole back into a sun. They could also both obviously do a lot of damage, using the power of a star to burn, blind, and incinerate people. They both became members of the X-Men at different times. X-Zorn was the first in 2002, but he wasn't always good. And his brother, Z-Zorn, joined more than a few years later.
And at 4, Robbie Rays. Robbie Rays was a young mechanic working in California, and the neighborhood he lived in was plagued by gangs and corruption, which would make several things difficult to say the least. He wanted to move into a safer neighborhood to keep himself and his brothers safe, but to raise the money he entered a street race to win $50,000. But when he got in the lead, what he thought were police started following him. Eventually he drove to a dead end, so he got out to explain himself, but then the men shot him, killing him. They tried to burn the car as well as his body, but his car was possessed by a ghost, which then possessed him, turning him into a new Ghost Rider. He chased after his killers and managed to get some of them, but not all. And as a Ghost Rider, he wants to be more than a spirit of vengeance, and after joining the Avengers, he proves to be one of their most powerful allies, even holding his own against the likes of the Celestials. He even made an MCU debut in Season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is canon to the MCU because of Phil Coulson, but also because if you've watched the show, you'd understand why the Avengers were after Loki's staff in Age of Ultron.
Number 3. Fake mutants. That moment when Marvel retconned the origins of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, declaring that they were no longer, nor had they ever truly been, mutants. Excuse me? In Uncanny Avengers Volume 2 Issue 4, it was confirmed that these two were not mutants, but had been disguised as mutants by the High Evolutionary, who had experimented on them, got bored, and disguised them as mutants, just for funsies. But this whole retcon really started during the Axis event. During Axis, Wanda basically found out through a magical blood test, as the results came flooding in, that Magneto was not her father. Although Quicksilver was confirmed as her biological brother, which, given everything that was implied between the two in the Ultimate Universe, and their intense love for one another even in the main continuity, would have actually been something that I think we'd prefer retconned out of existence. Please, tell us they aren't related. The retcon of Pietro and Wanda Maximoff not being related to Magneto or being considered mutants was something that made years of family drama and much of House of M feel irrelevant, which I think is why people kind of felt, betrayed by this.
And at 2, Finesse. Anything you can do, she can do better. She can do anything better than you. Since Jean Foucal's power is being able to perfectly mimic anything she sees, a power set very similar to Taskmaster, who she in fact suspects to be her real father. She was recruited into the Avengers Academy while training to be an Olympic athlete at the age of 14, and proved to be one of the most interesting characters, struggling with social situations but always demonstrating skill, since anything the best fighters could do, she could do after seeing it. She always prioritized knowledge over human interaction, thus making things awkward when interacting with others. Same, I totally relate. She also struggles to not cross lines, like when she blackmailed Quicksilver and betrayed X-23. She joined the Academy at the same time as Hazmat from earlier on the list, but definitely was a more interesting character. She blackmailed Quicksilver using her guess that he was never replaced by a Skrull, and because of this, he taught her everything he learned as a part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Interesting, but at least she's smart enough to figure it out. She had graduated MIT before being recruited after all. And yes, at 14. Finally, taking our number 1 spot, Gotham Girl. Superpowers don't really have a place in Gotham City, but with Rebirth, Tom King thought that a pair of superheroes were needed in the shadow that is Gotham City. Everything the light touches is your kingdom. What's that shadowy bit? That's Gotham. The two siblings known as Gotham Girl and Gotham, how creative, have similar abilities to Superman and were the starring attractions of the early Batman Rebirth issues, but their powers had a terrible catch. The more they used them, the closer they got to dying. Similar to Jane Foster, their powers were killing them, and they learned this the hard way. Gotham died because he pushed his powers too far, leaving Gotham Girl alone to fight for herself. Since Gotham Girl was more liked than Gotham, the writers made a good decision, and she eventually found Batman as a mentor who was teaching her how to fight crime without using her powers. That's an incredible story. A vigilante who has godlike powers but is unable to use them without potentially dying. That's more compelling than anything else on this list. It's wonderful and links Batman and Superman more than ever before.